He raised his voice, loud enough to echo through the vaulted corridors of Buckingham Palace. "Stand down! That's a direct order!" Trump barked. But the royal guard didn't move, didn't even blink. Because standing behind that uniform was something deeper than politics. And just as the tension built, footsteps echoed from the far end of the hall. It was Prince William. He didn't say much, just stepped between them, with a look that said, "This ends now." So what happened in the 90 seconds between a former US president's command and a future king's silent stand? And why did the guard's refusal become a moment that shook the monarchy and rewrote the day's agenda? Before we reveal that, tap subscribe and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's begin. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace's state dining hall, turning the polished marble floors into mirrors of gold and ivory. Staff moved quietly, adjusting silverware, aligning velvet chairs, whispering final instructions before the arrival of foreign dignitaries. It was supposed to be a routine, closed-door diplomatic meeting, formal, rehearsed, controlled. At the far end of the hall stood a single royal guard, Sergeant Arthur Winslow. His uniform was flawless. Bearskin hat, perfectly centered, rifle resting against his shoulder, boots aligned precisely with the edge of the red carpet. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't need to. His duty was not to speak, only to stand where history required him to. Trump's arrival broke the rhythm, not loudly but unmistakably. His entourage of Secret Service agents, advisors, and personal aides walked in ahead of schedule, their pace faster than palace protocol allowed. Palace ushers tried to redirect them toward the reception side, but Trump barely glanced their way. He was muttering about delays, schedules, and how ceremonial formalities made everything slower than it needed to be. Still, everything remained civil. King Charles entered moments later, composed, expression unreadable, accompanied by Queen Camilla and Prince William. The room rose to its feet, a sea of hushed respect. Charles nodded once, allowing everyone to sit. Diplomats from both sides exchanged practiced smiles. Pens clicked open. Briefcases were placed beside chairs, but Sergeant Winslow never moved. Because just beyond him, past the rope, past the entrance guarded by gold-trimmed doors, was something few ever saw, the private corridor that led to the king's war room. And no one, not even a visiting president, was allowed to cross that line without permission. Not yet. Not today. But someone was about to try. The meeting had barely begun when the first crack appeared in the room's silence. Foreign advisors exchanged documents. Diplomats leaned toward their microphones, and King Charles spoke in his usual calm, deliberate tone about cooperation, tradition, and the importance of respecting sovereign customs. Beside him, Prince William sat still, hands folded, listening more than speaking. But Donald Trump wasn't listening. His eyes weren't on the king. They were on the guarded doorway at the edge of the hall. The entrance to the king's private corridor, the path that led deeper into the palace, past the public rooms, past the ceremonial halls, toward the war room. A palace aide quietly reminded Trump, "Sir, you'll be guided there after the session, once security clearance is confirmed." Trump didn't bother to reply. He removed his earpiece, stood up before anyone else, and began walking toward the guard. A ripple of confusion moved across the room. The king paused mid-sentence. Prince William's brow tightened. Queen Camilla's hand froze on her teacup. Trump kept walking. Two Secret Service agents stepped with him, unsure if they should stop him or clear his path. The palace steward whispered urgently, "Sir, that area is restricted." Trump didn't slow down. "I'm here for a private viewing. They're expecting me," he said, loud enough for the nearest microphones to pick it up. Sergeant Arthur Winslow didn't move. His boots remained locked to the marble, chin level, rifle at his shoulder, a silent wall between the crown and whoever desired to cross it. Now, only a few feet separated them. Trump's footsteps echoed through the gold-panelled silence of the hall. The guard's grip tightened, just slightly, barely visible through the white glove. And that was when Trump said it, voice calm but cutting. "Stand down. That's an order." Not from a king, not from a commander, from a guest. The guard did nothing, not a blink, not a breath. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. For a few seconds, no one moved. Trump stood directly in front of the royal guard now, close enough to see his reflection in the guard's polished buttons, close enough to feel the cold stillness radiating from someone trained not to flinch, not to speak, not to obey anyone except the crown. Trump's voice lowered, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. "I said, stand down. You're not in a toy parade. I'm authorized to be here." Still, nothing. The guard's eyes didn't even move to meet him. His focus remained straight ahead, as if Trump wasn't even there. A quiet gasp came from somewhere near the diplomatic table. King Charles slowly leaned forward in his chair, not to speak, but to listen. Prince William exchanged a single glance with his father. Trump took it further. He turned, looked directly at his Secret Service detail and gave a small gesture with his hand. "Move him," he said. Two agents hesitated. One shifted forward but stopped. They knew the rules. They were on British soil, inside a royal residence, and the man standing between them and that golden door didn't answer to any president. Trump scoffed. He stepped even closer, eyes narrowed, and said in a quieter, more dangerous tone, "You think you can ignore me? Do you even understand who you're speaking to?" For the first time, just for a second, the guard blinked, not in fear, but in disappointment, and in that fragile, dangerous silence. He spoke, not loudly, not with anger, but with the calm precision of a man who had rehearsed these words his entire life. "Sir, by order of the Crown, no one proceeds beyond this point without His Majesty's command." A breath, a heartbeat, a silence thick enough to feel, and then Trump laughed softly, a breath through his teeth. "We'll see about that." He turned his head toward the king's table. "Your Majesty, remove him." Every eye in the room shifted to the king, but before Charles could even respond, Prince William stood up. Chairs creaked softly as Prince William rose to his feet. He didn't slam the table. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood, calm, controlled, with the kind of authority that didn't need volume to be heard. Every camera lens in the room shifted toward him. Trump's confident smirk faded just slightly, as though he expected King Charles to respond, not the future King of England. Prince William stepped away from his chair, his footsteps quiet against the marble floor. He walked toward the guard, not rushing, not hesitating, his eyes fixed only on Trump. Trump straightened slightly, unsure whether to speak or wait. William stopped between them, the president on one side or the guard on the other, placing himself directly in the line of tension. His voice was steady. "This man is doing his duty." Trump folded his arms. "He just denied a sitting president." William didn't let him finish. "He denied access to a restricted royal chamber. That order has stood through wars, invasions, and funerals of kings and queens. It does not change because someone is impatient." A faint murmur swept across the room. Trump's expression hardened. "Are you refusing a diplomatic request from the United States?" William's eyes didn't waver. "I am upholding a vow older than any office in this room." He paused just long enough for the words to settle. "Our guards protect the crown, not the crown's guests." The guard, still frozen at attention, didn't react, but a flicker, pride perhaps, touched his posture. King Charles watched quietly from his chair, his expression unreadable, but his fingers lightly pressed together in thought. Trump's jaw tightened. "So you're siding with a soldier over your allies?" Prince William leaned in just slightly, not aggressive but unshakable. "No, I'm siding with the oath every man in a bearskin hat swore before God, country, and monarch." A silence settled, heavy, royal, unbreakable. And for the first time, Trump had no immediate reply. All eyes slowly moved from Prince William to King Charles. Trump took a single step back and exhaled as if he'd regained confidence now that the final authority sat before him. He adjusted his cuff, turned toward the king and spoke with a tone that was less request and more expectation. "Your Majesty, I'm asking, formally, that this guard be removed for obstructing an allied head of state." The words hung in the air like a stone dropped in still water. The palace aides froze. Queen Camilla's teacup never reached her lips. Even the Secret Service stood motionless, caught between duty and disbelief. King Charles didn't answer immediately. He looked not at Trump, not at the ministers, not at the cameras. He looked at the guard. Sergeant Winslow stood exactly as he had from the beginning, still, silent, eyes forward, ready to be punished if that was the Crown's will. Charles's face revealed nothing. Trump continued, his voice pressing forward. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, if your guards can put their hands on foreign leaders, ignore orders, and stand in the way of diplomatic cooperation, then I don't see how this is still a partnership." A few diplomats shifted uncomfortably. Prince William's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. King Charles's fingers tapped once against the polished oak of the table, and then he gave the slightest nod to his Lord Chamberlain. It was not dramatic. It was not angry. It was simply final. The Lord Chamberlain stepped forward. His voice was soft, but it echoed through the silent hall. "Sergeant Arthur Winslow, you are relieved of duty." No gasp, no cry, just silence. The guard did not protest. He did not speak. He simply lowered his rifle, turned it, and presented it ceremonially for surrender. Trump allowed himself a faint smile. Prince William closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if absorbing a blow he knew was coming, but still wished hadn't. The guard bowed his head, and for the first time since he took his oath, he stepped away from the crown he had sworn to protect. Sergeant Winslow now stood alone. His rifle had been surrendered. His posture was still upright, but the weight of disgrace pressed invisibly against his shoulders. Behind him, the grand hall remained silent. Not a cough, not a chair creaked. Only the echo of a tradition being broken. Trump folded his arms, smug, certain, like a man who had just rewritten the rules of the room. Prince William, however, hadn't moved. He was still planted just behind the guard, his back half turned to his father, his gaze low, jaw tight. And then he stepped forward, one pace, then two. Trump turned to glance, perhaps thinking it was over, perhaps thinking the prince had come to congratulate him, but William didn't speak. He walked slowly, deliberately, until he was once again standing beside Sergeant Winslow. And in one graceful motion, he bent down, picked up the surrendered rifle from the red-carpeted floor, and held it upright. Gasps. This time audible. Even the Lord Chamberlain hesitated. Trump blinked. "What are you doing?" Still no answer. William turned to his father. His voice was measured, quiet, but filled with something far stronger than volume. If tradition can be broken at the first sign of discomfort, then it was never tradition. Charles remained still. William continued, "If a guard is punished for protecting the legacy of this crown, then who do we become?" And then, facing the room, not just the royals, but the foreign diplomats, the staff, the security, he said one final sentence. "This man stood for the monarchy when it was difficult. I will stand for him now." No anger. No rebellion, just truth. The kind of truth that makes a room pause and history pivot. King Charles didn't speak right away. For a few long seconds, the entire coronation chamber was caught in a kind of suspended breath, one where tradition, family, and diplomacy all hung on the same thread. The sovereign was not just a monarch in that moment. He was a father, a symbol, and a man watching his son remind the room what the crown actually meant. Trump shifted, growing visibly impatient. "Your Majesty," he said sharply, "this is a simple matter. Either your guard follows orders, or you don't have a guard." But Charles raised one hand, not toward Trump, toward the chamber itself, a soft gesture, a request for quiet, and then he looked directly at Sergeant Winslow. Not as a ruler looking down at a subordinate, but as a man, recognizing another who had been tested. "The guard stands restored," Charles said quietly. A murmur spread, confused at first, then respectful. He looked to his son, a slight nod, unspoken thanks. Then to Trump, with an expression that was neither cold nor confrontational, but one that carried centuries of restrained power. "This house," Charles said, "was not built to bend, not to politics, not to power." And then, with calm clarity, "The Royal Guard answers to the Crown, and the Crown answers to history." Trump didn't speak, because for once there was nothing left to say. Prince William handed the rifle back to Sergeant Winslow, and the guard, without a word, returned to his post. One step, about turn, heel clicked. The room held its breath as he resumed his stance. The storm had passed, not with noise, but with discipline, and a silence no camera could spin. By the time the heavy doors of the coronation chamber eased shut, the tone of the palace had changed. What had begun as a confrontation was now a whisper in the corridors. Staff moved differently, more deliberately. Palace advisors who had kept their distance earlier were now walking in quiet pairs, discussing what had just unfolded in voices barely above a hush. Trump exited first. No entourage, no remarks. His usual forceful stride was still there, but something in his expression had cooled. It wasn't embarrassment. Not exactly. It was the quiet realization that not every space bent to power, and certainly not this one. Further down the Grand State corridor, Sergeant Winslow walked alone, still on duty, still composed. But something in the air had shifted around him. Servants paused as he passed, not out of fear, but out of respect. Not just for him, but for what he had represented inside that chamber. 2 centuries of duty, and the stillness that sometimes says more than words ever could. Prince William remained behind for a few minutes after the others had gone. He stood beside the coronation chair, eyes scanning the golden detailing of the walls. Perhaps he wasn't thinking about politics at all, but about legacy, about who had sat in that room, about the next time such a moment might come, and what would be required of him. Because something had become clear that day, clear to everyone who had witnessed it. The guard hadn't simply followed orders. He had remembered where he stood, and in doing so, reminded the Crown itself. Later that evening, as dusk settled over London, and the lamps outside Buckingham Palace cast soft golden circles on the pavement, a single envelope was slid beneath Sergeant Winslow's door. It bore no crest, no signature, just a handwritten note on parchment, folded once. He opened it in silence, read it once, then again, then folded it carefully, as if it were a medal made of words. The note contained no apology, only a line from his training, one whispered to him years ago by a captain long retired. "We are not here to stop history. We are here to remind it where it stands." He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Outside his quarters, the evening guard was being changed. Boots clicked on ancient stone. The same sounds that echoed through coronations, abdications, weddings, wars, and tonight, one more quiet moment when the uniform did not flinch. So next time you visit the palace or watch a broadcast where a guard remains silent before a president, a king, or the world, ask yourself, what does it take to not move? To not yield, to be the only thing that doesn't shift when power enters the room. Before you go, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if you believe duty still means something in 2025. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the quietest man in the room is the one the world remembers.